Christians make quite a claim about the Lord Jesus Christ. We believe he was absolutely without sin. In fact, we'd go further. Because he is the God-man, God has come into our world in the person of Jesus. Not only do we believe that he didn't sin, we believe he was unable to sin. And yet, he was tempted in every way that you and I are tempted. So I don't know what battles you sometimes face, and perhaps you're drawn to something and you know you shouldn't really go that way. Jesus had the similar temptations as you and I, yet he never sinned. People have sometimes said to me, Roger, you're a Christian, practice what you preach. Now Jesus not only practiced what he preached, but he only preached what he practiced. I often think when he stood up and said, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Does somebody say, go a mile with me? Jesus said, well, go with him 2 miles. Does somebody say, give me your coat? Jesus said, well, give me your cloak as well. Turn the other cheek. When Jesus was saying all these things, he was saying exactly what he had been doing. His words and his works were perfectly consistent. They were married together, if you want. There was no duplicity, no sham, no hypocrisy with Jesus, the sinless Son of God. And it's interesting, those who were closest to him testified in this way, so that John, who was very, very close to Jesus, said, in him was no sin. Peter, who was a sort of action man, said, he did no sin. Paul, the great intellectual, said, he knew no sin. The book of Hebrews, all to do with the Old Testament and the New Testament and how they join together, said he's without sin. But it wasn't just the friends of Jesus who said this. Enemies of Jesus said exactly the same. Do you remember Judas, who'd been a disciple of Jesus for those 3 years and then sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver? He didn't even have 30 days in which to spend it, but he sold Jesus. Then he went and, well, he committed suicide, and his cry was, I have betrayed innocent blood. Pontius Pilate, who sentenced Jesus to death on a cross, said to the crowds who were sort of baying for his death and his blood, he said, why? What evil has he done? I find no fault in him. And even the Roman executioner, who was to make sure that Jesus really was dead, said, surely this was the Son of God. So people have often found fault with the church, and we know that we often mess up, but not with Jesus. Examine his life. Hear what he says, see what he's doing, and he is the sinless Son of God. And then think through the logic of it. If Jesus went to the cross and died carrying on himself the sin of the world, if he was guilty of sin, he could only have died, bearing his own sin. But because he was the sinless Son of God, he could take the sin of the world on himself. And yes, he carried it, and in one sense it crushed him, but it never contaminated him. He paid for it with his own blood. He died so that we might be forgiven. He died to make us good, that we might go at last to heaven, saved by his precious blood. He has loved us with an everlasting love. The sinless Son of God gave himself to the death on the cross, because his desire towards you and to me is that we might come to know him and find forgiveness and new life with him and through him and forever.